Pioneer's got some problems, but I think we can fix them. What's up, guys? Doomwake here, and welcome back to another discussion video on the channel. As you can see by the title and the intro, Pioneer is in a bit of a weird spot right now, and I wanted to have this discussion to go over maybe the history of some recent ban list announcements, where they stand on the state and the health of the Pioneer format, as well as a current metagame snapshot, all of those things combined, and we'll talk about what I think could potentially help fix the format long term. First and foremost, as with these discussion videos, please be sure to let me know in the comments section down below if you guys enjoy this type of content. Let me know what you would like to see as far as a discussion video is concerned. And with all of that said, let us start by taking a look back at the December 2023 ban list announcement. Here is an excerpt here. Now, for context, this is the announcement where Karn the Great Creator and Geological Appraiser were both banned, and Smuggler's Copter was unbanned. Now, I feel like a lot of people expected the Geological Appraiser ban. Karn was not necessarily on everybody's radar. Like, I think a lot of people thought that it was a possibility that Karn would eventually go, but I don't think people necessarily expected it to go at this particular time. But just reading the second paragraph here, they said, Karn's range is so broad it can facilitate convoluted infinite combos that make the format less approachable at little to no opportunity cost. We might rehash that statement a little bit later. Additionally, Karn's ability to naturally suppress artifacts is likely keeping a spread of interesting cards from being played. While it has recently been on the decline in terms of metagame share, it is clear that the deck has had a warping effect in the metagame for too long, and for these reasons, Karn the Great Creator is banned. As far as the Smuggler's Copter and Geological Appraiser are concerned, Appraiser, kind of obvious. We don't need to go into too much discussion about that. It was a turn 3 combo deck. They don't want that stuff in Pioneer. And as far as Smuggler's Copter is concerned, I think there was a bit of hesitation, myself included. I was actually kind of shocked when they unbanned Copter, but I think for the most part, it seems to be a relatively decent part of the metagame. The initial builds of Vampire, I think the Channel Fireball list, if I recall correctly, I think had 2 copies of Smuggler's Copter. I played a lot of it in the Gruul Vehicles deck, and various aggro decks have adopted it over the past 9 months or so, however long it's been legal. But I think overall it hasn't really had like a warping effect in the metagame, as much so as it was previously for the reasons that it was previously banned in the format in like the mono black aggro decks. So now let's fast forward to the March 11th banned and restricted announcement. This was the one directly after the Modern Pro Tour happened, which for context was won by Channel Fireball and Seth Manfield piloting Rakdos Vampires, which was the breakout deck of the tournament. This was Pro Tour Murders of Karlov Manor, which means Vein Ripper had just been released. And to be honest with you, I don't think this deck was on anybody's radar. It was definitely not on mine. I was somebody who was playing a lot of Pioneer at that time. The channel had mostly been Pioneer focused, and that is definitely an interaction that I missed. I'm sure a lot of other people had missed it as well. But with them talking about the format after the Pro Tour, said we made a few changes during our last announcement with the goal of setting up the stage for a more fun and diverse Pioneer metagame, which, to be fair, to their credit, I think they did achieve. By banning Geological and Karn, I think it really opened up the metagame a little bit more. Recent sets continue to impact the format with cards printed over the last year appearing in top decks. True. No More Lies, Deduce, Meticulous Archive, Amalia, Picklock Prankster, Sleight of Hand, Archdruid's Charm, and Vein Ripper, all cards from recent sets that have all made a huge impact in the format. The recently unbanned Smuggler's Copter also made an appearance in the aforementioned Rakdos Vampires, as well as Is It in Soul lists. With new cards impacting the format and a slew of viable strategies, Pioneer is in a great spot for our upcoming regional championship qualifiers beginning in April. Now, to their credit, when they made this statement right before the regional championship qualifier season had started, I kind of agree with that. And back at that time, the metagame was a little bit more diverse. This was when vampires had first been discovered and not become this potential terror of the metagame that we might talk about in a little bit. But I think overall the format was relatively healthy. This was when Phoenix started to pick up a little bit more in popularity. And then you had the Amalia deck that had just come out with Lost Caverns of Ixalan. That was the set prior to that. But those lists were still a little untuned and still not quite refined to the point where they are today. I think overall at that point, the metagame was relatively healthy. Fast forward a little bit to May 13th of this year. This is the announcement that was a couple of months after the Pro Tour. They said Pioneer remains in a healthy state after Pro Tour Murders at Karlov Manor. The breakout Rakdos Vampires deck from the Pro Tour utilizing Vein Ripper has proven that it is not a fluke and continues to be an important part of the Pioneer metagame. Prevalence has contributed to a decline in Phoenix's win rate, which I don't know if I necessarily buy that 100%. I don't exactly know what sort of data they use. Maybe they have like a specific win rate matrix for Magic Online data, but as a Phoenix player, I think that matchup is closer than a lot of other people think. A deck that we've been monitoring coming out of the Pro Tour given its large degree of success there. And then they said here, the biggest shakeup coming out of Outlaws of Thunder Junction was a large metagame increase in mono-black Waste Knot decks, utilizing the brand new CreativeRX the Punisher. Where are those Waste Knot decks today, huh? CreativeRX is a massive card advantage engine alongside all of your interactions that commit crimes, and another strategy that can meaningfully play 4 copies of Go Blank is a powerful option against the front-running Phoenix. Now, to be fair, at the time, Phoenix was still one of the more, if not the more dominant deck than Rakdos Vampires. People hadn't really necessarily fully made the switch to Vampires. Now, this is an important piece, which we will see this trend continue in the next ban list announcement. For now, Pioneer is in a great place where playing any macro archetype is viable. Aggro, control, mid-range, or combo, with tools for each strategy to address one another. And now if we fast forward to June 24th, this was the most recent ban list announcement. Now, they start off by saying we are seeing a flood of results and deck lists stream in from Pioneer Regional Championship qualifiers, and it's a mixed bag. The biggest positive we are seeing in the format is that almost every macro archetype is viable. One thing that we are going to keep a close eye on is the evolution of the Amalia combo deck. A creature combo deck, we are generally positive on it. Unfortunately, its ability to draw the game is a negative play experience, which I 100% agree with. We are making no changes to the format today, as we still see room for the metagame to shift around the surge of Amalia combo, and because regional championship qualifiers for Pioneer continue to mid-July, we don't like to disrupt those events mid-season. So that is the last couple of ban announcements, including the banning of Karn and Geological Appraiser. Now, with all of that said, it seems to me that their big takeaway from these announcements is that they like when all macro archetypes are viable: aggro, control, midrange, and combo. Now, for the sake of argument, let's go ahead and take a look at the metagame snapshot of the last 30 days as of recording today. Last 30 days from August 6th, 2024. Rakdos Vampires coming in at a whopping 27.8%. And if you look, there's Rakdos Vampires there, and then Rakdos Midrange 3 slots later at 5.8%. I went through the deck lists, and I really couldn't find that much of a difference, so if anybody has any ideas in the comment section, let me know down below. But realistically, Vampires is at over 33% of the metagame. Abs Animalia 17.6%, Is It Phoenix 12.2%. Now, if you combine the metagame percentage share for those 3 decks alone take up over 62% of the metagame. For context, if you look at the modern metagame snapshot over the last 30 days, this is the Nadu format, by the way, it's right about half. It was around 31% of the top 3 decks in modern. So if you look at the top of the metagame, it is extremely top heavy when it comes to those 3 decks. And I think a lot of the people's negative complaints that come towards Pioneer specifically revolve around those 3 decks. Now, as far as every macro archetype being viable, aggro, control, mid-range, combo, I don't see aggro, I don't see control, and I guess you could argue that Phoenix is this weird, like, control mid-range hybrid, right? It's really hard to classify Is It Phoenix as a deck, by the way. There's definitely games where it can feel like an aggro deck, where you mill over 2 to 3 Phoenixes in the first couple of turns and start attacking your opponent for 6 or 9 damage on turn 3. There are games where it feels like a control deck, where you just kill all their stuff and draw a bunch of cards. And even in post-board games, you can play mid-range-esque fights with stuff like Crackling Drakes. Phoenix is good because it has the ability to adapt between those 3 macro archetypes, and maybe that's what they're saying when they say this. But as far as macro archetypes are concerned, I'm seeing a lot of combo. Now, I might get a lot of flack for this, but Rakdos Vampires, it's a combo deck, whether you want to believe it or not. If you go back and look at the history, Rakdos Midrange was the best deck for the longest period of time. And even when it was the most played and the most winning deck, I don't really remember seeing a lot of complaints about it. Sure, there was the occasional, maybe you want to ban Fable here and there, but for the most part, everybody was kind of just okay with playing against Rakdos midrange because it was a midrange deck, a true midrange deck that played creatures and removal and 4-drops. Now, if you take a look at the Vampires decks nowadays, they have some elements of that, but realistically, 100% of the time, their plan A in every single matchup is just find Sorin plus Vein Ripper, also known as Show and Tell plus Atraxa. There's not a lot of differences there. And I think the other big issue with Sorin plus Vein Ripper is how quickly it ends games. The Rakdos midrange deck of old used to have to play much longer games with stuff like Bloodtithe Harvester and Graveyard Trespasser and all these 3-drops, and there were relevant interactive points. And now it's just, oh, here's my Sorin, here's my Vein Ripper. If you don't have the very specific answer that you need to kill my creature that has ward sacrifice a creature on the spot, you're just going to die next turn, because Vein Ripper also synergizes so well with the plus abilities on Sorin to sacrifice Mutavaults, and it also synergizes with Bloodtithe Harvester. It's not very difficult to kill your opponent on turn 4 with Vampires, basically, is what I'm saying. So, at the end of the day, Vampires is, for all intents and purposes, in my opinion, a combo deck. Now, as far as Amalia is concerned, the Amalia metagame, if you're comparing it to Vampires specifically, it is much, much less than that, 17% compared to around 33, 32%. But I think the biggest issue for Amalia, which is something that they addressed in a prior ban announcement that we talked about earlier, is the fact that specifically red archetypes that have Monstrous Rage, a lot of the plans in that matchup is specifically the goal of the red player wants to draw the game. If you go into a match of Magic with your intent on being, I want to draw the game, we have kind of a bit of a problem there. All you have to do is go back and watch the Pro Tour Murders of Karloff Manor Top 8, where Simon Nielsen played a 7-game match. That's all you need to know on that subject. It's just not good for tournament Magic, for paper tournament Magic. But I think for that reason alone, I would like to see a little bit of a change. And then as far as Phoenix is concerned, now it breaks my heart to say this because I have been playing a lot of Izzet Phoenix over the past 2 or 3 months. It's a little strange because you can point to certain cards in the Vampires and Amalia decks that are problematic. Like there's a very specific combo piece. It's like Sorin plus Vein Ripper or Amalia plus Wildgrowth Walker. With Izzet Phoenix, there's not really a combo going on. It's just a bunch of cantrips, some card draw, and the creatures. But when people talk about Izzet Phoenix, they always seem to talk about one specific card, and that card is Treasure Cruise, which to its credit has quite the history of being broken in multiple different formats, Modern, Legacy, it's restricted in Vintage. I believe, to my knowledge, I think Pioneer is the only format where you're allowed to play 4 copies. So yeah, it's got a track record on it. So for the sake of changing the metagame, if I am of the opinion that I think something from Vampires needs to go and something from Amalia needs to go, where is the 44% or, sorry, 27, yeah, 44% of metagame share? Where's that going to go if we don't remove anything from Phoenix? It's probably going to go towards Phoenix, to be honest with you. For the sake of competitive diversity prior to this upcoming regional championship cycle, preferably, in my wish list, again, this is personally, if I was in charge of changing the Pioneer format with the goal to specifically increase metagame diversity, because 3 decks taking up 64% of the metagame, it's just unacceptable. The 3 cards that I would ban are Sorin, Imperious Bloodlord, Wildgrowth Walker, and Treasure Cruise. See, it's weird because I think that the Phoenix gameplay, and let me know in the comment section down below your thoughts on this, but I actually don't mind the Phoenix gameplay. Maybe that's because I've become a Phoenix main myself, and I'm sort of taking a blind eye and being oblivious to the fact that what I'm doing is kind of messed up. But there's a lot of interaction points. There's Graveyard Hate's good against it. Now, obviously, Cruise might be a bit out of bounds and something that maybe the deck shouldn't have access to, but as far as the Phoenix gameplay, it's not that bad, especially when you're comparing it to stuff like, oh, show and tell my Vein Ripper to play on turn 3, or literally kill you on turn 3 with my Amalia deck. In closing, that's one thing that I really want to bring home about. Specifically, if you go back to the last ban announcement in December of 2023, the last time they banned cards from the format, Geological Appraiser was banned because it was too consistently able to end the game on turn 3, and they only had 4 copies of Geological Appraiser. It's not like you had 8 effective copies of that card. And Rakdos Vampires and Amalia also end the game on turn 3 a lot of the time. Now, it's in a different fashion for sure, but they really do put so much pressure on the format to force you to interact early and often, and in these very unique ways. Like, you need a specific removal speed for Amalia, but those removal spells are definitely not good against Vein Ripper. So I think it's putting a little bit too much pressure on the format in terms of the answers that it's requiring you to play, the speed in which your deck has to operate, the number of creatures that you play in your deck. There are certain decks that you just cannot play into a field of Amalia, like Gruul Vehicles. The other consideration, potentially, is maybe you want to just weaken the decks a little bit, maybe weaken their consistency. And if you don't want to kill the decks outright, perhaps there's maybe an argument to say, I don't know, banning a Blood Tithe Harvester. Perhaps there's an argument to banning Collected Company or Court of Calling or some other consistency piece for Amalia. Maybe with Phoenix, it's really tough because if you ban a random cantrip, they're just gonna like say, okay, whatever, I'll just play less cantrips. Maybe you could talk me into the Picklock Prankster and make them go back to playing pieces of the puzzle, because 3 mana sorcery versus 2 mana instant, that's a huge difference. Maybe there's something you can do there. But I really do think that if your goal is to specifically increase the diversity and the health of the metagame overall, which they've said in previous ban announcements that they are trying to do, I really think that we need to be addressing all 3 of those decks. Now, again, not sure if you want to kill them outright. Maybe you just want to decrease their consistency, but something has got to happen. Let me know what you thought in the comment section down below, but that is my personal opinion as someone who has played a lot of Pioneer over the past 9 months or so. Anyways, let me know what you thought in the comment section down below. Like, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one. Adios.